Hey, it's Wednesday, it's noon, so welcome to the Inspired Talks. I'm going to jump right in. In the early 1990s, I came home from the Middle East and I knew something was wrong. I was misdiagnosed as being depressed and placed on Prozac, but the truth is I wasn't depressed. I was traumatized and quite possibly experiencing what we would now call post-traumatic stress. I was hypervigilant, constantly scanning my environment. I was hyper aware of sound and movement, and I had 5 or 6 screaming nightmares every single week, the kind where you wake up soaking wet with perspiration, heart racing, nervous system absolutely on fire. And at that time, I honestly thought everybody slept like that. Today, I want you to hear this clearly. I sleep like a baby. I fall asleep in about 90 seconds. I don't wake up during the night. I get 7 hours sleep a night consistently. Now, I share that not as a personal victory story, but to make a simple, evidence-based point. Trauma is an injury, and injuries can heal. Over the past 11 years, I've dedicated my work to understanding what actually happens to the human nervous system during a traumatizing event, how perception, memory, and defense mechanisms get altered, and which modalities work consistently and verifiably to eliminate the symptoms of post-traumatic stress to the point that a person no longer meets the diagnostic criteria. Today, I want to talk about how our current cultural conversation around trauma, especially in the media and pop culture, is helping in some ways, but also quietly getting in the way of healing. Let me start with an observation. Today, the word trauma is everywhere. It's in our news feeds. It's in our social media captions. It's in the marketing language, therapy conversations, and everyday speech. People now say, that was traumatic, to describe everything from a breakup, to a bad boss, to a difficult childhood, to a natural disaster. And here's the paradox. On one hand, this is progress. We're finally talking about psychological pain openly. We're naming experiences that were once minimized or ignored. Now, on the other hand, something important is happening beneath the surface. When everything is trauma, we risk losing clarity about what trauma actually is, and more importantly, how trauma actually heals. Today, I want to explore what happens when trauma becomes a cultural identity rather than a nervous system injury, and why that distinction matters deeply for recovery. From a clinical and neuroscience perspective, trauma is not defined by the event. Everybody says that. Anybody who's credible understands that, whether it's Gabor Mate, Bessel van der Kolk, Peter Levine, they know that trauma is not defined by the event. Trauma is defined by the body's response when an experience overwhelms the nervous system's capacity to process and integrate it. I'll say that again. Trauma is defined by the body's response when an experience overwhelms the nervous system's capacity to process and integrate it. 2 people can live through the same event. One develops trauma symptoms. The other does not. How is that possible? 2 humans experiencing the same event. Well, it's possible because trauma is not what happened to you. Trauma is what happened inside your nervous system when escape, resolution, and meaning-making were unavailable. At its absolute core, trauma is a disruption in threat detection, emotional regulation, memory consolidation and reconsolidation, and autonomic nervous system balance, specifically your sympathetic nervous system running wild. This is why trauma symptoms show up as hypervigilance, emotional numbing, or emotional unregulation, intrusive memories, sleep disturbances. There is soft pedaling if I've ever heard of it. The inability to fall asleep and being woken up at the deepest part of your REM cycles every 90 to 120 minutes. Difficulty relaxing even when nothing is wrong. I will rephrase that. The inability to be present in the moment. The beauty of life is in the moment. The past is an illusion. The future is an illusion. The only beautiful thing is this moment we live in now. Well, none of those responses to the traumatic event are character flaws. They're not weaknesses. They are not identity. They are an adaptive survival response that did not get turned off. It's a perfect response gone crazy. Now, modern media conversation around trauma has done something really, really, really important. It has done a lot to remove shame. People can now put up their hand and say, I was traumatized. Survivors no longer have to suffer in silence. Well, that's not quite true. They can put up their hand and say, I've been traumatized. They still suffer in silence because most of them can't afford psychotherapy, and most of the psychotherapy is garbage. And I say that, and I'll challenge anybody to confront me on that. People feel permission to speak today, and that matters so much. But the media culture has also introduced a subtle risk. When trauma is framed primarily as a permanent scar, a person's defining story, or a fixed identity, people may unconsciously organize their lives around being traumatized rather than healing from trauma. Now, I take runs at organizations and individuals all the time. There are organizations, which will remain nameless for the purpose of this, that the price of admission into the organization is to have PTSD. And then they take these people on vacations. You could go to a retreat in the Philippines, or you could go on a bike tour in the southern France, or you could pull a sledge to the magnetic North Pole. But to be part of that club, you have to have PTSD. Well, what's the impetus to heal there? You get all the support mechanisms, but to get the support mechanisms, you must have PTSD. Where's the momentum to healing there? Now, this is not because people want to stay stuck. Nobody wants to stay stuck and broken. It's because identity is powerful. If the trauma becomes who I am, then healing can feel like losing part of myself. Think about that. And clinically, we know this. The nervous system does not heal through storytelling, and certainly not through storytelling alone. In fact, leading thinkers, people who are actually sentient and in this moment understanding neuroscience, will tell you that storytelling for the bulk of the population actually exacerbates the traumatic response, makes it worse. It heals through resolution. Healing requires completing the defensive response. It requires reprocessing memory networks. It requires restoring parasympathetic regulation. It requires reestablishing safety in the body. Now, the two sides of our autonomic nervous system, sympathetic and parasympathetic, this one is flight, fight, freeze, and a whole cascade of chemistry that comes with it. That chemistry is dangerous if you're experiencing it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because it is sacrificial. It will sacrifice some integral aspects of your biology for safety. Your parasympathetic is rest and digest. It's regenerative, it's anabolic, and there's a cascade of chemistry that comes with that creates health and vibrance. So awareness is the doorway to this healing. Awareness is not the destination. It just isn't. So here is why this distinction matters so much. When trauma language becomes imprecise, 3 things happen. First, people experiencing normal distress may believe they're broken when they're actually responding appropriately to life stress. Second, people with true trauma injuries may receive validation without receiving healing tools. And third, systems, healthcare, social services, communities may prioritize language over outcomes. The goal is not to debate whose pain counts. The goal is to match the right intervention to the right nervous system state. and especially the right intervention to get the nervous system operating right. Trauma-informed does not mean trauma-affirming forever. And trauma-informed, that single designation, doesn't mean anything about healing. It means how a clinician engages the client. Trauma-informed means recognizing trauma and supporting recovery, because unresolved trauma narrows life. Resolved trauma restores choice. So here is the reframe I'll leave you with today. Trauma is real, 100%. Trauma is flippin' serious. And trauma is treatable. We can hold compassion without turning trauma into a destiny. We can honor stories without trapping people inside them. And we can talk about trauma and still believe deeply in recovery. The most hopeful message we can offer is trauma will not define you. The most hopeful message is this happened to your nervous system, and your nervous system can heal. Just like your skin heals, just like your bones heal. We were given the innate ability to heal. When we shift the conversation from identity to injury, from disorder to injury, from story to physiology, from awareness to resolution, we give people something far more powerful than validation. We give them a path forward. Trauma deserves to be understood and respected because trauma is an injury that can heal. I'll see you next Wednesday.